The G20 summit has concluded in Rio de Janeiro, drawing attention to Nigeria's efforts to secure membership and expand its influence on global platforms. During his time in Latin America, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has actively lobbied for the nation's inclusion, emphasising its potential to amplify Africa's voice in global decision-making while unlocking significant economic opportunities. Also, Nigeria focused on attracting foreign investments and mobilising capital for critical infrastructure projects. While these outcomes may take time to materialise, they do hold the potential to deliver improved infrastructure, economic growth and job creation in the coming years. The President's participation in Rio followed the successful visit last weekend of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Abuja, marking a milestone in bilateral relations. Agreements were signed in customs, geospatial mapping and cultural exchanges. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by journalist Tolu Ogunlesi. He joins me from Paris. Tolu Ogunlesi, it's an absolute pleasure having you on Channels Business Global. I was just saying off camera that we don't get to see you enough on telly. Of course, we read all of your tweets, but we don't get to see you. So it's an absolute pleasure that you've taken time out to speak with me. Before we get into the meat, which of course is G20 and Modi's pretty successful visit, I want to talk about President Tinubu, the man, in terms of his character. Is it fair to say that he's performed quite well over the past couple of weeks? Because, of course, we know he's not the best orator. I don't think anyone in the villa will be too mad at me for saying that. And there had been, at times, questions about his health. But to be honest with you, looking at kind of the warm reception he received across the board in Rio, and then, of course, the kind of natural friendliness between him and Modi, I would say he is almost appearing as a statesman-like figure on the world stage. Would you agree with that? I want your assessment of how he's been.
Yeah, I think it's been a good couple of weeks. There was Saudi, of course, before. Yeah. There was Saudi where it was an opportunity for Nigeria to kind of like say, look, global matters, global matters affect us, and we want to have a say in what's happening in the Middle East. And of course, the Indian visit, the visit of the Indian Prime Minister, I think that was really good. A big plus for Nigeria, actually. Seeing Prime Minister Modi, quite excited and enthused about visiting.
And Indians, let's be honest. It's like we were, Nollywood and Bollywood met on X and, there was a love fest. It did feel genuine, didn't it?
Long overdue also. It's been 17 years since an Indian Prime Minister visited Nigeria. So that's, a big deal. And then, of course, the G20.
Which we're going to go into. Let's pause there and I'll ask about G20. The big thing, of course, is that we're advocating for inclusion. Yeah. Good, we understand the reasons, but some are saying, look, when it comes to UN Security Council, when it comes to G20, these institutions are archaic. What are you doing? Is it late or does it actually have validity and it makes sense?
Well, there's actually no better time than now to actually make that argument and that push. And of course, the context to this is that there is the whole clamor for a complete overhaul of the global governance and financial systems. Yeah. So governance, Security Council, the financial system, the way, debt management, debt servicing, the reforms of the multilateral development banks, all of that stuff. And of course, they're intertwined. So this, of course, is an excellent time to make that push. And Nigeria's ambitions to join the G20, I think, fit very well into that context.
Okay. Another topic discussed during discussions in Rio de Janeiro was, of course, about, fostering more foreign direct investment. The only thing is we've heard that time and time again now, Tolu. I think most Nigerians are sick of hearing that because we get all of these pledges, but we're not seeing the tangible outcomes. What are the tangible outcomes? You've walked in the corridors of power for many years across many administrations. Are you thinking that perhaps we could actually bring back some goodies from Brazil, real goodies, not just the beautiful pictures, which of course the media team do so well? We actually want to see result. Will there be any?
Well, yeah. So I understand the, citizens want to see, look, you go to Saudi, you go to India, or you go to the US, to the UNGA. What's in it for us? Obviously, it does take time. Investments are not sort of things you snap a finger to get. But I, as you said, I've worked in government before. I've seen that it can sometimes take years between, discussing FDI and starting to see the benefits or the tangibles of it. And I saw that again and again, so for example, if you talk about like the Siemens power deal in Nigeria, the first conversations about this were in 2018 or thereabout. But it took, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, because these things take time. There are discussions, and I think I understand it's genuinely hard for citizens to sort of like understand why these things have to take time. Obviously, maybe there are things we can do to make them faster, but these things take time. But I am quite optimistic. So, for example, with sort of like in the energy sector, for example, you're starting to see a shift. Nigeria is.
Do we want to see a shift, or do we want to see light? I think they want to see light.
Well, so with energy, so with oil and gas investment, for example, and the reforms that you are seeing, gas fiscal incentives and all that stuff, I think it just calls for a bit of patience. But I think that those goodies, those things that are pledged, a good number of them will happen. I have to say, I was at the G20 in India last year. I listened to the pledges by the Indian investors, lots of them. And a lot of those pledges actually are being fulfilled. These are actually, the thing with FDI is that not all of it is completely new. A lot of it is by people who are already playing in Nigeria, who want to expand. And we are seeing a lot of that. I think that, there's a big failing of media coverage actually when it comes to FDIs in Nigeria. I think we have to acknowledge that we don't see a lot of like actual follow-up to say, look, I don't see, and it's one of the things I try to do with my social media, to point out that, look, these things are happening. Unfortunately, we get so caught up in cynicism and all that.
Scandal and speculation.
Scandals and speculation. Not a lot of people are actually paying attention to say that, look, I think that there's a lot more investment coming to Nigeria that has been acknowledged.
Now, do you know what? You've touched on some really important points here, and I want to pivot slightly off topic because you've mentioned the media, and again, trending this week has been the reshuffle within the media. You spoke about patience. Is it then the role of the villa, not necessarily networks such as channels, to constantly be updating the public about what's happening, not getting into spats amongst themselves, but, really explaining what is going on? I know that they are dogged on social media, but are they being strategic enough? Please touch on that area, particularly, Daniel Bwala. I know Daniel Bwala personally. Of course, he was on with my colleague Shaun during the week. Didn't really go down too well. Talk to me about brand Nigeria, just briefly before we go, and where they're getting it wrong, and some advice, if they're listening, to how they can turn things around. Because again, the president did quite well on the global stage, but people aren't really talking about it back home.
As somebody who has worked in in that space before, I'm very sympathetic, to the nuances and the challenges of that space. And I think that one of the things that also the mistakes people make also is to put all the attention on the villa, on the presidency. I think that, there are many senior government officials who also have, absolutely important duties and responsibilities in communications. All the ministers, for example, you've got dozens of ministers, you've got hundreds of agency heads and all that, But for the villa, obviously, that's meant to be the center and the hub, because when the villa speaks, people pay attention.
That's right.
And you see that, when the villa issues a statement, no government statement goes further than what is coming out of the president's office. So obviously, yes, they play an important part. But, if you also look at what's been happening in, you've been seeing that, look, there's been quite the effort to put out communication. But of course, we're in the social media age where you are competing with a million other sources of information. And I always say this, that, gone are the days when 30 million Nigerians listened to a single TV station at 9 p.m. on weekdays, in the 90s. In the age of social media, you have this completely fragmented space, and it's just harder for any single voice to dominate, and it's not just the government that is facing this challenge. Even legacy media are also finding out that a lot of power you used to wield.
We saw that in the result with Trump. I've got to push you, Tolu. Was the Bwala appointment the wrong decision?
Well, I will not comment on the.
Was it the wrong decision? Yes or no? Was it a great decision?
I don't. It's not in my place. As I said, I haven't been there. I understand that, the public may not always see what informs decision making.
Should Daniel Bwala be the spokesperson for the president?
Well, they have a statement has come out saying that, there isn't a single spokesperson. And so, it's not, I think that's put that to rest. That,
you're towing the line there, aren't you? Tolu, we're running out of time. We're coming towards the end of the year. It's been a decent couple of weeks. What are you hoping the president will be bringing back from Brazil? There are some state visits before the end of the year. How can they turn this around to get people on side at a time where it's tough? It's tough also here in the UK, believe it or not. Where you are in France, it's also tough. But the nationalism is still there. How are they going to be able to get Nigerians on side so that we can move as a collective oneness in positivity and optimism and hope? Very quickly, if you can.
The biggest message that government should focus on is the cost of living issues, inflation, cost of living. Yeah. I think that all the messaging that should be going out should be focused on, look, we acknowledge that, there's a cost of living crisis in Nigeria, and these are the things we are doing to get prices down. I mean, we've seen that happen in the US, in the UK, where government messaging, it becomes a single issue message, just focused on, look, prices are high, we must get them down. I think that, that's what at this time, more than anything else, that's what people want to hear. Yeah. And that's what government should be saying and focusing on. Yes,
not bringing down former presidents, but just focusing on the matter at hand. Always a pleasure speaking with you, Tolu Ogunlesi, who, of course, is a journalist. He wears several other hats. Thank you so much for taking your time out today.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.